The air hung heavy, thick with the musk of damp earth and decaying leaves. John, an experienced hunter, stepped confidently into the untamed wilderness. He adjusted his backpack, the weight of his rifle familiar against his shoulder. He was eager for the thrill of the hunt, unaware of the terror that awaited him. The sun, a pale disk through the dense canopy, offered little warmth. John pushed deeper, the familiar woods giving way to an alien landscape. Towering trees, their trunks impossibly wide, stretched toward the sky like grasping claws. The forest floor was a tangled mess of roots and undergrowth, swallowing the sound of his footsteps. A shiver ran down his spine, a primal fear he couldn't explain. He checked his compass, a knot of unease tightening in his gut. The magnetic north seemed to dance erratically, the needle spinning wildly. He was lost in a place that felt both ancient and deeply, unsettlingly wrong. Panic threatened to overwhelm him, but John forced it down. He had faced danger before. This was no different. He scanned the woods, his senses on high alert, listening for the snap of a twig, the rustle of leaves that might betray his presence. The silence was unnerving. No birdsong broke the stillness, no squirrels chattered in the trees. Even the insects seemed to have deserted this part of the forest. It was as if the woods themselves were holding their breath, watching him. He stumbled upon a clearing, a circle of barren earth devoid of any vegetation. Strange symbols crudely carved into the trunks of surrounding trees stared back at him. They were ancient primal markings, speaking of a power that sent a fresh wave of fear coursing through him. He was being watched. John pressed on, his unease growing with every step. He thought he heard whispers, carried on the wind, just beyond the edge of his hearing. They were high-pitched, guttural sounds, like nothing he had ever heard before. He dismissed them as a trick of his imagination, the product of a mind on edge. But deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted. Something was out there. Something that moved silently, unseen, observing his every move. The air grew colder, the oppressive silence broken only by the sound of his own ragged breathing. He felt a presence behind him, turned quickly but saw nothing. Just the endless, oppressive trees, their branches intertwined like skeletal fingers reaching out to grab him. A twig snapped. This time there was no mistaking it. John whirled around, his rifle raised, his heart pounding against his ribs. He caught a fleeting glimpse of movement in the undergrowth, a flash of something dark and swift disappearing behind a thicket of ferns. He moved cautiously toward the spot, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He pushed aside the ferns and found nothing, but the scent of something musky and wild lingered in the air, confirming his suspicions. He was not alone. He backed away slowly, his eyes darting from shadow to shadow. The feeling of being watched intensified, prickling at the back of his neck. They were out there, hidden in the undergrowth, silent hunters stalking their prey, and he was the hunted. The forest, once a source of peace and solitude, had transformed into a nightmare. Every sound, every movement sent shivers of fear down John's spine. He felt exposed, vulnerable, like a fly caught in a spider's web. He pushed on, driven by a primal urge to escape the suffocating darkness of the woods. The whispers returned, louder now, circling him, mocking his fear. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were toying with him, herding him like cattle towards some unknown fate. Nightfall brought no respite. The darkness was complete, impenetrable, amplifying every sound, every rustle of leaves. He stumbled through the undergrowth, his clothes ripped, his body weary, his spirit close to breaking. Sleep was impossible. He huddled at the base of a giant oak, his back against its rough bark, his rifle clutched tightly in his hands. The whispers continued throughout the night, punctuated by the occasional snap of a twig, the clatter of stones against each other. He caught glimpses of them in the darkness, shadowy figures flitting between the trees, their eyes glinting with an eerie light. They moved with an unnatural grace, their footsteps silent, their presence both terrifying and mesmerizing. They were close now. He could feel their eyes on him, their hot breath on the back of his neck. He knew that he couldn't outrun them, not in this darkness. He had to think, had to come up with a plan. As dawn broke, casting long, eerie shadows through the trees, a desperate plan began to form in John's mind. He had to use their knowledge of the forest against them, turn their greatest strength into his only advantage. He climbed a towering oak, hauling himself up branch by branch. From his vantage point, he could see the forest floor spread out beneath him like a map. He spotted a stream winding its way through the trees like a silver ribbon. Water. It was his only chance. He climbed down, his muscles screaming in protest, his hands raw and bleeding. The whispers followed him, growing louder as if sensing his desperation. But John refused to give in to fear. He had a plan and he would see it through. He reached the stream, the sound of rushing water a symphony to his ears. He waded into the icy water, the current tugging at his legs, threatening to pull him under. He moved downstream, using the cover of the trees and the noise of the water to mask his scent and his sound. He could hear them on the banks, their frustrated cries echoing through the trees. They were close, but they were hesitant, unsure of how to follow him into the water. He continued his perilous journey downstream, the water growing calmer, the forest beginning to thin. The whispers faded, replaced by the sounds of birdsong and the chatter of squirrels. He had escaped. John emerged from the forest, blinking in the bright sunlight, a changed man. He had stared into the abyss, had felt the icy breath of fear on his skin, and had emerged victorious. He had faced the unknown and had lived to tell the tale. He never returned to that part of the forest, the memory of that terrifying experience forever etched in his mind. He carried the scars, both physical and emotional, as a reminder of his encounter with the hidden tribe, the silent hunters of the woods, and though he never spoke of his ordeal, the fear lingered, a constant shadow in his eyes, a testament to the terrifying truth. There are some places in this world where man was never meant to tread.